It should have been a normal morning. My wife, Sarah, was watering the flower beds along our driveway when a black SUV stopped at the curb. Three men stepped out wearing dark tactical vests labeled HOA Enforcement. They were big, bulky, and walked with the kind of attitude you see in bad cop shows. One of them pulled out a clipboard and said without greeting, "You're being cited for unauthorized landscaping alterations. Sign the violation notice and acknowledge fines of $2,500. Sarah stared at him, blinking. "We don't even live in an HOA, she answered. The man stepped closer, voice rising. "Sign the citation." "No." He wasn't used to hearing that. Two of the other men stepped forward, boxing her in like she was under interrogation on her own lawn. Neighbors peeked out from behind blinds, too nervous to get involved. Sarah tried to walk back toward the house when the leader grabbed her wrist. She yanked her arm back. He tightened his grip. Then he twisted. I wasn't home yet, but I heard the scream from halfway up the block as I turned onto our street. The sound will stay with me forever. By the time I jumped out of my truck and ran toward the yard, Sarah was on the ground, clutching her arm, tears streaking her face. The largest fake officer stood towering above her. "What did you do to her?" I demanded. He turned, sneering. "She resisted. HOA penalties are legally enforceable." I stepped closer slowly. "Look at me," I said. He frowned. "I said, look at me." He did. And in that moment, he realized something was wrong. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't yelling. I was calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. I knelt next to Sarah. Her forearm was bent at an unnatural angle. She couldn't even speak, just gasped through the pain. My voice went hollow. "You broke her arm." "She should have complied," the man said. The other two nodded, acting like this was normal protocol. I stood up. "You have 5 seconds to leave." One of them smirked. "You touch us, we'll charge you with assault on an officer." I stared into his eyes. "You aren't officers." He jabbed a finger into my chest. "Last chance." I didn't give one. The moment his hand connected, I trapped his wrist, pivoted, and dropped him face first into the gravel so fast he didn't even get a chance to yell. His breath left him in a single pained wheeze. The other two went wide-eyed. The second man rushed me, swinging like a bar fighter. I blocked, drove my palm upward into his elbow, and heard a scream as he crumpled. The leader backed up fast, realizing for the first time they didn't have the upper hand. He tried to draw something from his belt, pepper spray or maybe a taser. I slapped his wrist and kicked his legs out from under him. 3 men, each more than 200 pounds, were now on the ground, groaning and struggling. I spoke quietly. "Nobody touches my wife." One of them tried to get up. I planted a knee between his shoulder blades and pinned him down. The others followed, struggling uselessly in the dirt. Neighbors came out now, not to help, but to make sure they saw everything. Sarah screamed in pain again. I ran to her, lifted her gently, and carried her toward the porch. Our neighbor, Mrs. Coates, rushed over. "I'll call 911. "No," I said. "Call the sheriff directly, not emergency dispatch." She nodded and dialed. 5 minutes later, law enforcement cars rolled up with lights flashing. Real officers, real uniforms. Deputy Wilson, someone I'd seen growing up, walked over with his hand on his belt. "What happened here?" I motioned to Sarah, still holding her arm. "They assaulted my wife, broke her arm, claimed to be HOA police." Wilson's face darkened. "You 3, don't move." One officer rolled the leader onto his back and pulled open the vest. No badge, just an embroidered patch bought online. Wilson picked up their clipboard, The papers were cheaply printed, unsigned, with a phony government seal. "Where'd you get these?" The leader swore and spat, still trying to sound authoritative. "We are authorized by the Homeowners Association to enforce." Wilson's expression shifted from stern to angry. "There is no HOA. I know this neighborhood." He held up the paperwork like it was a used napkin. "This is fraud, and you assaulted a homeowner." One of the men stuttered. We were hired." "By who?" No answer. Wilson looked toward me. "You did this?" He nodded toward the positions of the detained men. "Yes." He walked over. "Legally, you're in the clear. They assaulted your wife on your property. You used appropriate force to stop an ongoing assault." Wilson knelt beside the leader. "You're going to jail for impersonating law enforcement, aggravated assault, attempted extortion, and conspiracy." The leader tried to speak. Wilson cut him off. "And that's not counting what the county prosecutor adds after reviewing all this." The men were cuffed and loaded into patrol cars. Wilson came back over as Sarah was lifted into the ambulance. "I've been in law enforcement 30 years. I've dealt with thieves, drunks, and idiots. But this?" He shook his head. "This is new." I nodded. "People think fear is authority." Wilson looked toward the patrol car windows where the fake HOA officers sat fuming. "But fear only works," he said, "if the person you're threatening isn't stronger." I looked back at my wife being driven away, lights reflecting off her pale face. That night, I stayed by her hospital bed, holding her good hand until she fell asleep. The next morning, I read the sheriff's press release. "Fake HOA enforcement ring shut down. 4 families targeted, thousands in fraud seized." But none of that mattered as much as the simple truth I realized. There's one line you never cross. You don't lay hands on the woman I love. Ever.
I am Liam, and trust me, the next HOA story is even worse. Subscribe now.